Welcome back. It is easy to say we'll build that wall and have Mexico pay for it, but the reality is Mexico won't pay for the wall, and it remains to be seen if Congress coughs up the tax dollars to flip the bill. The former Mexican president, Felipe Calderón, was on the Suncoast this week discussing relations between the U.S. and Mexico. Calderón says it is not a good idea for the U.S. and Mexico to be fighting like this. And joining us for more on these issues is Rod Thompson, the president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and attorney Andres Coppolassi. I have the name right?
Yes.
All right. Rod, let me begin with you because you heard the former Mexican president talk about how much the U.S. and Mexico has in common, and that the friction now in terms of the wall and immigration and NAFTA is not good.
Well, I mean, I think friction generally isn't good, but this was inevitably going to come to a head because we've had what I think is a very poor immigration policy for several decades now that has done a fair amount of economic damage to the lower end of Americans. So because Mexico is not nearly so adamant about enforcing their northern border as they are their southern border, and because both Republicans and Democrats have had some political gain by winking and nodding at a very fluid border and allowing illegals in, it's been a bad situation. That was eventually going to catch up politically with us, and it did.
And Andres, I want to get your reaction to that. But first, Rod, you know, there have been some statistics in the first 2 months of the Trump administration. Illegal border crossings were down 40%, but it was also true that illegal border crossings were down dramatically under President Obama.
Right. I think part of that, I think we know for fair certainty that the border crossings are going to mirror the strength of the economy in Mexico, and Mexico's economy is going to be clearly attached to the U.S. economy. So when our economy was really bad, Mexico's was really bad, there was a lot more Mexicans coming here in hopes of finding work. As our economy improved and Mexico's economy improved, there was much less of that, and some of them felt like they could go home and find work. So it makes a lot of sense from an economic perspective.
I was going to actually get to the trade issue a little bit later in the broadcast, but one of the arguments for NAFTA, which is you know, caused so much discussion in this country, is that by strengthening the Mexican economy, illegal immigration has really decreased. So when you hear the president saying we're going to get rid of NAFTA, Andres, what's your reaction?
Well, the reaction in Mexico has been, NAFTA has been great for both countries. Since NAFTA, the trade between Mexico and the United States has significantly increased, right? Now, Mexico is the second biggest or largest buyer of American products. I think that's a good statement. That means Mexicans really like American products.
But you know, the argument you often hear, and the argument a lot of our viewers would make, is that all those manufacturing jobs that were done in the U.S., that you know, they went back to Mexico where labor costs are less. So it may have improved the Mexican economy, but it certainly didn't help U.S. workers.
Well, it certainly helped the U.S. as well, because President Calderón mentioned yesterday that if you were to take the border states of the United States and the border states of Mexico together, that would be the 5th largest economy in the world.
Right. And Rod, what about that? I mean, you know, the trade agreement is a really difficult issue because many Republicans supported it when President Clinton signed it into office.
Yeah, and I was one of them, actually. I was a real fan of NAFTA because I'm a free trade person in principle and philosophy. I'm not sure that NAFTA's worked out quite as much as well as we thought it would. I don't know that it needs to be totally junked, but I think it really needs to be seriously renegotiated so that it's a little bit more fair to the United States.
Okay. We are going to just take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have an updated forecast with our meteorologist, so stay with us. Welcome back. The former Mexican president visits the Suncoast and discusses the wall, trade, and President Trump. We are with Rod Thompson, who is with the Sarasota Republican Club, and attorney Andres Coppolassi. And Andres, let me start with you, because the Mexican president made the case about why the wall is detrimental to the relationship between both countries. But you know, a lot of the people who are watching this right now, they're very straightforward about it, that illegal immigration is illegal, and that you know, no matter what, allowing folks in to work, even if they work hard, means that they came in illegally. So how do How do you make the case to them?
Well, President Calderon's position was very clear. His position is the real threat is not illegal immigration from people that come here to work. The real threat is organized crime and terror. And in his opinion, organized crime and terror will work around, over, or under the wall. So his invitation is to both countries work together and resolve the issue that way.
Well, I mean, is the wall, Rod, a panacea for all the problems associated with the southern border?
No, not a panacea at all. But to me, it is at this point now a necessary tool to have in the toolbox because it's been too much of an open sieve. I mean, I love the idea of working together with the Mexican government to try and fight the cartels there. And I also agree that that the physical threat is crime and terror. But I also think there's an economic threat of, you know, we've talked before about when you have most of the illegals coming over the southern border are going to be unskilled, uneducated, and they're going to be taking the low-end jobs, and that hurts working Americans and lower-income Americans.
But we've had that discussion before, and in fact, we're going to be doing a show in the near future about the lack of farm workers. There are not enough people there who are willing to pick the tomatoes or pick the strawberries in our area, and you know, if those farmers paid higher wages, then the cost would go up for consumers. You know, the question is, you know, whether, you know, whether guest workers have always had a place, whether they came here legally or not, in terms of the jobs that Americans don't want to do.
I never liked that phrase, jobs that Americans don't want to do unless you add on at the current price point, because in part because of our safety net. So yeah, Americans are not going to want to work the strawberry fields in Florida's heat for $3 an hour. They're just not going to. However, what that probably means is that the price of strawberries has been artificially low for too long. Those wages probably should be higher, and probably if they were higher, what would happen is there'd be some automation that would go on too. This is, to me, this is purely an economic issue.
All right, let's talk about the wall itself. Andres, number one, do you think a border wall would be effective?
I oppose the wall, and I don't think it will be effective.
Why?
I think the wall would just bring a lot of pressure into Mexico. And if the Mexican economy struggles, we know that more immigration is going to try to come. Therefore, if we work together and bring more benefits between both countries, more commerce, more legal immigration, if you want to say it, that way it will be better. So instead of putting that money into building a wall, let's put it into resolving the real issues and bringing more benefit to both countries.
Let's talk about the wall itself. I saw one estimates that it will be at least $24 billion, and you heard over and over again what candidate Trump said about Mexico paying for that wall. Rod, number one, do you think Mexico is going to pay for that wall?
Not directly. If we're talking about are they going to write a check and front it, never in a billion years is that going to happen. However, that's not the only option, because the second part is, you know, a reasonable question is Congress going to fund it? And my point is they darn well better. That was, to me, that was part of the message of the election. They fund it, but the point is they can fund it. So
that means the folks who are watching this tonight,
Absolutely.
They're going to pay for it.
That's right. Up front. Look, we have to pay for immigration enforcement. That's part of the cost of a country, is having borders and paying for immigration enforcement.
Let me stay on that for a second. Right now, today, we see that, you know, for 8 years, Republicans have said that they want to repeal and replace Obamacare. Priority number one, they have not been able to get that done yet. So you think that you're going to get a bill through Congress and on the president's desk for $24 billion to build a wall?
Yeah, actually, I think that would be a much easier one because of the complications of repealing and replacing Obamacare and the you know, 100 million people that could affect in their health coverage and all. And a very complicated one. I think that the wall is pretty straightforward. Are you willing to fund it? And is there a plan for in some way getting repatriation money from Mexico to at least pay for part of it?
And that was my next question to you, Andres, that the alternative for from Mexico writing out a check for the wall would be to take it back in terms of a repatriation. Thank you very much. You know, what is your view of that? I mean, I would imagine that the Mexican government and Mexican citizens would not be supportive of that as well.
Well, it comes at a very difficult time in Mexico because Mexico is heading into elections next year. So if the current president supports the idea of paying some part of the wall, that would be very risky for him.
What is the politics of that down there? We know that the current president of Mexico is incredibly unpopular.
Yes, his ratings are pretty low, but the Mexican people do not want to pay for that wall. They don't think it's fair. They don't think it's an act of a good neighbor. So he's going to have a really, really hard time trying to...
So Rod, what chance do you think that the Mexican government, even if it's a new administration in Mexico City, would ever agree to any kind of agreement? Repatriation money,
Wow.
I could get that out. That they would agree in any way.
Little to none. There's little to none chance that they would, because they have their own internal politics to deal with. But those aren't the only ways. Look, there's a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars that flow from Mexicans that are in this country back to Mexico. Well, we have legal methods in which we can take a percentage of that money and apply it. That's not the only one. There's also, there's other things regarding companies and company businesses that do it. None of these are perfect. I'm not surprised that Mexicans don't want to pay for the wall. Not having a wall has been very beneficial to Mexico in the first place. Why would they even want one in the first place, let alone actually pay for it?
Well, the amount Mexicans send 24 billion, more or less, to Mexico every year, right? The trade between Mexico and the United States is close to 300 billion. So for 20 billion, 24 or so billion, are you going to put in risk 300 billion in trade?
Well, right, but that's for goods and products and all. So that's an actual trade. This is just cash being sent from the country back to Mexico. So to me, those are two different items. I don't think those are an either-or proposition. I don't think Mexicans are going to stop buying American stuff because that there is a cost to sending money from Mexico or from America to Mexico.
Well, what are the Mexicans going to do if the United States builds a wall? Are they going to continue buying American products?
Sure they will. If they find it in their economic benefit to buy an American product, they will.
Right, but I would imagine that a trade war between both countries...
we don't want a trade war. I'm totally opposed to trade wars, but I am in favor of fair trade. Good. I mean, I would love to have free trade, wide open free trade. But most of the rest of the world doesn't really want that. And we have enough leverage to where I think that we could negotiate much better trade deals that could give much free trade that is good for everybody, but is more fair to American workers also.
Right. Why don't we take just a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment for final thoughts. Welcome back. It's time for final thoughts. And Andres, I'm going to start with you because you heard from the Mexican president, Calderon. You've heard the arguments that many people are saying that they want that wall. They want the government to do something about illegal immigration. What do you say to them?
Well, on my last visit to Mexico, it was very clear to me that Mexican people, Mexican businessmen, their leaders want to work with the United States. President Calderon said it yesterday several times. If we work together, we're stronger. So my invitation is let's rethink the wall. Let's try to put that money into other type of programs, and let's work together for benefit of both countries.
But how likely do you think that President Trump is going to change his mind in terms of building that wall? So therefore, how likely is it that the two countries can work together?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to change his mind, but you can always ask. And I think if both countries work together, definitely it's going to be better.
Rod, predict things. Is that wall going to go up?
Yes. The wall is going to go up. In some fashion or another, it's going to go up. And it better be to the satisfaction of the Trump supporters, too, that it goes up. It can't be a faux wall, that's sort of, yeah, we got some surveillance stuff out there and call it a wall. I think there needs to be an actual, real physical wall for large parts of it where people are coming through now. And I think that, there are a number of ways to pay for it. But the bottom line is I think that Americans, when they elected Trump, one of the main things that they wanted from him was sort of common sense immigration reform. They wanted immigration security at the border, and they wanted the laws of the land enforced, which we haven't done for a long time on immigration.
What are the political implications if that does not happen?
One-term president and loss of Congress for Republicans.
You don't think the base will stay with President, if that wall does
I think
not
you'll
go
see a
up.
huge fracture in the Republican Party if the wall or something acceptably close enough doesn't happen. I'm not saying that we need the Great Wall of China for the whole thing, but we need something that is a serious detriment to coming across the border, and it's not just a chain link fence.
Okay. Why don't we leave it there? But before we go, we want to talk to you about what we reported on yesterday about a controversial proposal for a recycling facility near the celery fields in Sarasota County. The applicant, James Gabbard of TST Ventures, has donated more than $17,000 to 4 of Sarasota's sitting county commissioners. Dozens of you shared your thoughts on our Facebook page. John White writes, even before this revelation, this ill-advised project had the feeling of being greased. Besides, the land is not truly surplus if it provides a buffer for other nearby county uses. Charles Oster writes, this is such a travesty, and if the people allow this to happen, they ought to hang their heads in shame. Money does not solve everything. Give nature its due and protect its resources. And Cindy Garcia writes, Gabbard has a great idea. This is a good, viable way to bring employment to our area, and it is definitely a needed project. Perhaps the celery fields is not the best location. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku.